It's not a coincidence that Reverend Pat Ball, our mentor minister, has headed up Unity Ministries in Motion. She's always on the move in some plane of existence or another. Pat recently sold her condo in Calgary and was guided by Spirit to Golden Horseshoe Estates in Beamsville, Ontario, which I believe is not far away from the center in Hamilton. She's waiting for a modular home to become available, trusting that all is in divine order. In the meantime, she's staying with her daughter in Ottawa, where she's been hanging out since December 3rd last year. Before we hear Pat, we're going to hear a beautiful song from our own dear Desiree Stevens. And Desiree has been many things in her life: a mom, a dance fit instructor, a competitive dancer, a singer, performer, a Unity youth group leader, a student of life, and last but not least, a pumpkin. Yes, I said a pumpkin. This happened at the Richmond Farms several years ago. She said it was all fun until she got pinned against the fence by some kids poking their finger at her and saying, "You're not a real pumpkin." Feeling she was going to get pushed over the fence, she desperately wanted to body check the kids, but thought the better of it and found some help. That's what happens when you get turned into a pumpkin. Anyway, here's Desiree with Unwritten. Passion Bedingfield.
I am unwritten, can't read my mind, I'm undefined. I'm just beginning, the pen's in my hand, ending unplanned, staring at the blank page before you. Open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find, reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibitions, feel your rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you, only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Drench yourself in words unspoken, live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins, the rest is still unwritten. I break traditions, sometimes my tries are outside the lines. We've been conditioned to not make mistakes, but I can't live that way, no. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find, reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibitions, feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you, only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Drench yourself in words unspoken, live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins, and feel the rain on your skin. No one else can feel it for you, only you can let it in. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Drench yourself in words unspoken, live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins. rest is still unwritten.
Thank you so much, Desiree. That was awesome. And welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to be here to be speaking to you about our choices. You know, we have so many choices to make every day, don't we? Think about all the choices that you have to make. Even before you get out of bed, you choose whether to get up right away or to hit that snooze and snuggle for a few minutes. You choose whether you're going to be in a good mood or whether you're going to be cranky. You know, you have to choose what you're going to wear and what you're going to eat and what you're going to do next. And then you go on to make hundreds of choices every day. Some of them, and most of them actually, you don't even think about. Some are habit, some are automatic. Mostly they're by default. But suppose you made them all intentionally, examining whether it's God's will or your ego will, and then going, just a second, sorry, and then going from there. Because that's what the power of will is all about, making decisions and then acting on them. Just like Daniel was singing about, love is our decision. But before we go any further, I want to talk to you about something that is really scary for a lot of people, God's will. You know, as a minister, people ask me, what is God's will for me? Or what is God's will for my life? This question comes from a belief that God has a specific plan for our life, a kind of divine plan or predetermination. And we have to find out what it is. Some people spend their entire lives trying to find out what it is. What's the plan for me? And they're afraid to make any decision about anything in case it's not God's will. Where does this belief come from? Well, Reverend Paul Hesselbeck, who's going to be next week's speaker, says this belief comes from the religious practices that people were raised in. They've been taught that God is separate from them. God is external from them, a kind of anthropomorphic God. That means making God as humans. You know, they say there's a little joke that says, well, God made us in its image, and then we turned around and made God in our image. And it's like kind of like thinking that this is a super being, something that's going to micromanage our lives. And you know what? That's not what's going to happen. Paul says, in actuality, the will of God is non-specific for any of us. The divine plan, God's will, is for each of us to allow God to express the maximum amount of goodness, godness, and Christ consciousness, all the same thing, different words for the same thing, that we can at our present level of awareness. Sometimes I like to picture God as being like a mother who has lots of kids, sends her kids out to play. She doesn't care if they play hopscotch or tag or hide and seek. She just wants them to play nice with each other and have fun, right? In other words, God doesn't decide what's best for us. We do. So when we ask ourselves, is it God's will or is it my will? We're asking ourselves, am I making this decision from my Christ consciousness, my God consciousness, not a higher consciousness, or from my ego, my limiting self? Am I using my higher power of will, my power of will from the highest level? You know, this whole characteristic of will. This year, have you noticed that we've had one of the 12 powers as a monthly theme every month? We've been talking about these past months. Some of you may not have been here for all these talks, but many of you have studied and are familiar with these innate capacities, these innate abilities from God. And there's still 4 left because there's 4 months left. But the interesting thing is how these powers, though we've talked about them individually, are all linked together, especially the power of will. Reverend Paul Hasselbeck, he made a chart showing how the power of will influences each of the other 11 abilities as it makes the executive mind decisions. And I want to show you this little chart, you see? And it's when we link the power of will, and there's the 12 powers over on the side, then what happens? When we link the power of will with faith, then it's will that decides what we believe. When we link the power of will with strength, it decides when, where, and for what we go forward. When we link the power of will with judgment, it decides what we judge and when and how we apply what we know. When it's linked with love, it's what we desire, need, require, and for whom we have the highest regard, or what. When we link the power of will with power, which is our voice, it's what we master or have dominion over. When it's with imagination, it's what we visualize, with understanding, what we know, elimination, what we deny has power over us or what we get rid of, with order, when and what we organize, with zeal, what we are passionate about, and life, what we vitalize or enliven. In other words, in every area of our lives, the power of will makes the decisions because it is the executive power. It is the deciding power. When we make a decision for love, it's will that decides it. It's really amazing. Do you remember Unity's fifth principle? You remember it? Knowing these things is not enough. We must act on them. So it's important to be aware of what we do with our power of will, because it's our power of will that directs us as to what to do. I remember before I became aware, I didn't know what to do with my power of will. I didn't even know I had one. I just, kind of thought I was going along with whatever. And it was my will that told me to do that. I gave it away to inappropriate people. I tended to subjugate myself to others' will. I didn't feel worthy. I felt lost and confused. I didn't know how to make decisions for myself. I didn't trust my decisions. I was afraid they'd be the wrong ones. I didn't realize what I was supposed to be doing with my power of will. Well, over 35 years ago, one of the most enlightening, life-changing experiences that I had was when I was introduced to Overeaters Anonymous. It's a 12-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous, except it's about food. I was using food to ease myself, to ease all the discomfort that I felt, the fear, and I was just eating and eating and eating, and it was just crazy. I weighed a lot more than I do now. You've never known me any other way, but trust me, I was not always a normal size. Well, the textbook that we use, a lot of us in Overeaters Anonymous, is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's like the basic textbook of all the 12-step programs. We just changed the words in it from alcoholic and alcohol to food and compulsive overeating. And we realized that the program works just the same for compulsive overeaters as it does for alcoholics. So in fact, once we get past the first step, there's 12 steps. And once we get past the first step, that's the only place that alcohol is mentioned in the steps. That is the only thing that's about the substance. All the rest of the steps are about treating the mental twist, our mental obsessive thinking, and how to have a spiritual awakening, which is what I had, which brought me to unity, and a personality change. Now, the part that pertains to our power of will the step that does, comes just after listing step 3, which states here, we made a decision, see, decision, to turn our life and our will over to the care of God as we understood God. Now, you know, I mean, before I realized what I was doing, it was like self-will run riot. I want to read you from the big book because it's so illuminating. It says, most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show. Now, they're not the director. They're like an actor hired to read a script. But oh no, we want to write the script. We want to direct the show. We want to arrange the lights, the ballet, the rest of the players in our own way. And the thing is, we've got it all figured out for everybody. If only my arrangements would stay put, if only people would do as I wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including me, would be pleased. And isn't that the point of your life? Isn't it all about me? Don't you want me to be happy? Life would be wonderful. Now, the thing is, in trying to make these arrangements, I could be sometimes quite virtuous. I may be kind and patient and generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Oh, so self-sacrificing. Being a martyr for everybody, just, you know, so that you'll follow my script. But if you don't, then I could turn mean or egotistical and selfish and start lying about things. Mostly it's a mixed breed, depending on what's going on. But what usually happens? Well, guess what? The people that I want to follow my script are not very happy. The show doesn't come off very well. And so what do? Do I let it go? Oh, no, 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 no. I exert myself even more. I try to be even sweeter, more gracious, you know, or more demanding. Still doesn't suit me. And I am totally pissed off. I become angry. I become, you know, like just a full victim. Like, what is wrong? You know, it's like, I'm just trying to get people to do what I want them to do. It's all about control and about will, holding on to that will. Oh boy, because I'm a victim of the delusion that I'll get satisfaction and happiness out of the world if I can manage it well. And you know what happens? All the rest of the players, oh, they've got their own script too. And they say to me, screw your script. I'm not going to read your script. You have to follow my script. And so there's all this power of wills. It's like self-will run riot because we think we know what's best for everybody. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Talk about strong use. So that's all I'm reading from there. It goes on and on. There's a lot more to do about how to handle it. But, you know, I've certainly, you know, talk about wrong use of the power of will. I've certainly had times when I would describe my behavior as exactly that. Hopefully, I've mellowed over the years, but I certainly have to keep being consciously aware of how I'm trying to get people to follow my script, because the crux of the matter is, how can we develop our faculty of will so we are allowing God to express as us, so we can experience health and happiness and joy and peace and harmony and all the good that we can't even imagine? How can we do that? Well, we've got a solution. Do you remember Wendy talked about Reverend Winifred Hausman last week? She was talking about her book, The 7 Steps to Developing Our Faculty of Will. Well, guess what? I'm going to use the same book and the same steps from that Winifred shared. But while Wendy was talking about it, showing us how the Fillmores developed and used their power of will to form unity, today I'm going to use her process to describe how to develop our power of will personally. So the first step is willingness. Self-will or willfulness must be replaced with willingness. The willingness to learn, to change, to stop resisting, to do God's will. In other words, stop trying to be the director, handing everyone their script, releasing old habits and behaviors, Or if you've taken scripts from every director in your life and trying to do them all, stop. Take a stand, just draw back, do your own thinking, make your own choices, maybe even choose a whole new lifestyle. As Winnie says, whether we have in the past exercised a strong personal will or allowed ourselves to be dominated by others, we must be willing to learn God's way now. So let's affirm, I am willing to learn God's way. Are you with me? I am willing to learn God's way. Are you willing? So if you are, we'll go on to step 2. Once we're willing to learn God's way, we must make our choices and stick with our decisions and follow through on them. This is when we call on the power of strength, one of the other powers, to help big time. We have to call on our spiritual strength. These 2 steps are probably the hardest because of the changes needed to be able to carry through. This is when we can keep repeating, God's will, not my will, be done. God's will, not my will, be done. Coming from my higher power, not from my lower ego. Coming from love, not from fear. That's what's so important. And so we can affirm this little tongue twister, I will to will the will of God. So once we've resolved that, I will to will the will of God, we haven't done anything yet. We've just made the decision. Now we have to get into training. The will, our ego will, must be re-educated into right thinking, taught to make right decisions, and to work under the direction of our growing spiritual understanding. Can you see how it's really impossible to develop this faculty without calling on all the others? And the reverse is true. As this faculty is developed, it trains the other ones too, all the other faculties, awakening them to the divine potential, watching our thoughts and feelings and supervising what choices we've made. So let's affirm, I invest the resources of my mind and body in a program of spiritual training. Actually, we never graduate from this step of training, even though we go on further to what Winnie calls obedience. Oh my goodness, when I saw that word, I do not like obedience. Obedience? Give me a break. I certainly had it removed from my marriage vows on both occasions. But we're not talking about obedience to a person, a human here. We're talking about being responsive to our inner voice. As Charles described obedience in the 12 Powers of Man, he called it a letting go of pride, ignorance, selfishness, ambition, and the 1,001 dense ideas that make the soul opaque. So it's kind of like having cataracts on our eyes of spirit. I don't know if any of you have had cataract surgery, but I had it a few years ago. And the interesting thing was I had my left eye done first. And my right eye still had the cataract. Well, I did not notice that there was any change before I had my surgery. I just thought that's the way the world was. Well, when I had my cataract removed from this left eye, oh my goodness, everything was like 100 times brighter. The colors were denser, the trees. I mean, it was just, I just went around looking at everything. I had no idea. I'd go around going like this, looking at this eye, and then looking at this eye, and going back and forth, thinking, oh my goodness, look at the difference. Wow, I could hardly wait to get the other eye done. It's just like opened up a whole new world. It was so funny. And that's what this pride and ignorance and selfishness does. It stops us from seeing our inner eye clearly, seeing that allowing it to come through us. And so let's affirm together, in the light of God, I faithfully follow the best I know. Now, that brings us to step 5, which is self-governing. And here it is. So if we've released willfulness, we've started making decisions and acting on them from the highest consciousness we have, we're ready to exercise our faculty of will. See, these other 4 steps were preparation steps. Now we're ready to exercise the power of will, what Charles Fillmore called the executive power of the mind. It's the one that gets the corner office. It's like the chief, the president. Now, God is in charge, and so all the orders come through the power of will. So at this point, we're no longer depending on anyone or anything outside of ourselves to make decisions for us, and we're no longer trying to force our will on others. Our will is now governed by our Christ consciousness, and it carries out orders from what Charles called headquarters, right? So even if we seem to make a wrong decision, because we're in touch with our higher power, we find that something better has resulted. Maybe not right away, but looking back days or months or even years later. I know so many decisions that I made that a day after I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? You know, I listed my condo in Calgary on like Sunday. It was, well, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. Is it really? Seems like last week. I don't know. And I sold it on the Wednesday. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I done? Oh, I don't have a home anymore. What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? And it was like, oh, okay, Pat, just wait, just relax, relax. God's in charge. I know you've made a decision, but we're not going to know that it's the right decision. And so here, you know, this week, finding a place that I want to settle, it's so, I was driving around in the Niagara Peninsula, and it was like, this is it. This is where I want to be. There was something about my consciousness just opened up, and I just went, oh, this is where I belong right now. And so I still don't have a home, but I know that it will be coming, that I manifest. And the Lori house that I'm living with, she's a fast manifester too. So the two of us together, it's going to happen. And I'll let you know as soon as I know. So let's just affirm together. God works in me to will and to do that which it would have me do. And God cannot fail. But this isn't the last step. Remember, there's 7 steps. There's 2 more. Step 6 is surrender. Now, when we say, thy will, not mine, be done, we know we're giving up all our ego direction. I quite often, you know, when my ego starts coming up, I say, you know, honey, because my ego was like, somewhere between 3 years old and about 11 or so. And it thinks it knows best, and it's scared and wants to tell me, wants to drive my bus. I say, no, honey, no. God's in charge. You go lie down, go play with your toys, go, play with Chloe, just all is well. And you can't smash your ego down. You can't hit it. You can't force it. It's a little child. You've got to just love it, soothe it, nurture it. And so thy will, not mine, be done. It's not just about saying the words, but being so completely in agreement with God's will that we're willing to trust and have faith in the executive power of our mind. And it doesn't happen all the time. We need to surrender. But just remember, surrender, it's not the same thing as submission. Submission is giving up. It's kowtowing to somebody's stronger will. It's from the outside in. Surrender is giving in. It's a positive activity. It's consciously giving all the power to the Christ within us. We're in tune with God. And so let's affirm, not my will, but thine be done in all things. Not my will, but thine be done in all things. And then we go into the seventh step. At that final step, we're no longer consciously surrendering. We don't even realize we're doing it. We're so one with God that we never even have to think about it. We let our lives move in harmony with it. And you know, we go in and out of this step, don't we? I mean, it's a learning purpose, you know, it's a learning process. I mean, you know, if we could live in this all the time, oh my goodness, wouldn't our lives be just full of harmony? You know, but it doesn't mean that stuff doesn't happen. It always will, because we live in an impermanent world. Change is inevitable. And when it does happen, now we know what to do, because God is doing for us what we could never do for ourselves. We could never make wonderful choices. So let's affirm, I am the will of God in expression.
I am the will of God in expression.
Thank you. So now let's take this into meditation. And I invite you to relax, breathe. Center your attention in your heart. Just breathe into your heart. Relax your jaw. Relax your eyes, your body. Center on the flame if you want to watch something. And let's remember what we've affirmed in our hearts, in our heads, and allow these words to sink down those 18 inches into our hearts. I am willing to learn God's way. Yes, I am willing to learn the way of pure love. And because of that, I will to do the will of God. I will to invest my resources of mind and body in a program of spiritual training. Because in this light of God, I faithfully follow the best I know. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but the best. Because God, Spirit, works in me to will and to do that which it would have me do. And of course, Spirit never fails. No matter what happens, there is good in it. So not my will, but thine, Spirit, be done in all things. Because I am the will of God in expression. I allow God to express through me, as me, at all times. I'm so grateful for the teachers who have gone before me and for who have shared their wisdom and learning with all of us, so that we may expand our conscious living. and be the will of God in expression. And now, after a time of silence for a moment, we will return to this time and place as we listen to Desiree sing us out of meditation in a moment. Let's take this moment of silence right now. So it is, and so we let it be.
Am I strong enough to bear the burdens that sometimes come, living this thing called life? Am I wise enough to make the right decisions when I'm standing at the fork in the road? Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. Will I have enough to do the things I need to do to take care of myself? Will I have the health, the mind, the body to live the life of grace and wholeness? Sometimes I wonder and ponder, only to realize I'm not alone, and there's nothing I have to do on my own, because I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. I am the place, you are the place, we are the place where God shows up. I am the place, you are the place, we are the place where God shows up. I am the place, you are the place, we are the place where God shows up. We are the place where God shows up. We are the place where God shows up. We are the place where God shows up.
Well, thank you, Desiree, for your beautiful, heartwarming, and delightful songs. And Pat, thank you so much for that inspiring and enlightening message. And it was also practical. And that's what we love about you, Pat. You are practical. And thank you so much, both of you, for this magical, magical moment.